spent the last few weeks with something a little unusual open on my second monitor. Load modeling software, utility rate data, and the full engineering spec sheets for 5 of the most talked about commercial flywheel energy storage systems on the market. Instead of trusting a single manufacturer's brochure, I ran every one of these systems through independent simulation, plugged in real facility loads, real utility demand charges, and modeled exactly what would happen if you actually installed each one. And what came out the other side completely rearranged the way I think about backup power. Stick with me to the end, because the number one pick on this list broke a rule I genuinely did not think a flywheel could break. For the last 30 years, the standard pitch for backup power and peak shaving has looked exactly the same. You buy a bank of lead acid or lithium batteries, you size them to your load, and you hope you never have to lean on them too hard, too fast, too many times. But if your entire understanding of energy storage stops at chemistry, if you have never once considered a spinning wheel of steel or carbon fiber as a legitimate industrial asset sitting quietly in the corner of a mechanical room, you are ignoring one of the most durable and most misunderstood technologies available to any facility manager who is serious about reliability. And here is the part that really got me curious in the first place. The problem with flywheels is not the physics. The physics are almost embarrassingly simple. A kid could understand it. The problem is that almost nobody actually models these things against a real commercial load before buying one. People read a brochure, they see a big number, and they sign a purchase order. That is exactly what I set out to fix. I took 5 systems, ran their real engineering specs through simulation software, modeled the discharge curves under real draw, and ran the cost per kilowatt hour math against what actual facilities are paying in demand charges every single month. Some of what came out of that modeling completely upended what I thought I knew going in. So let's get into it. Number 5, the Pillar POWERBRIDGE PB50. Before I even opened the spec sheet on this thing, I had to confront the single most misleading number in the entire flywheel industry. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. It is the headline power rating. Every spec sheet you will find online advertises kilowatts. Almost none of them tell you for how long. A flywheel rated at 500 kilowatts sounds enormous, until you realize that number might only be sustainable for 8 seconds before the wheel spins down below usable voltage. 8 seconds. That is the hidden tax on flywheel purchases, and it has burned more facilities than you would think. People buy for the number on the box and then discover, usually during an actual outage, that their real usable energy window is barely long enough to bridge the gap before a diesel generator kicks in. The PB50 earns its place on this list because it is engineered around this exact honesty problem, and I wanted to see if that honesty held up when I modeled it against a real load. Running its published discharge curve through simulation, it delivers a genuine 300 kilowatts for a full 15 seconds at rated load, which is precisely the window most data centers and hospitals actually need to bridge a utility outage before backup generation comes online. It uses a steel rotor spinning inside a vacuum-sealed housing, magnetically assisted bearings to cut friction losses, and 0 chemical components that degrade with heat or age the way a battery bank does. Modeling the installed cost for a unit size to a mid-sized data center puts you right around $180,000, compared to an equivalent lithium buffer bank at roughly $400 per kilowatt hour of short-duration ride-through capacity. The flywheel pays for its premium in avoided battery replacement cycles inside of 6 years, based on the numbers. Not bad for the entry point on this list, but it only gets more interesting from here. Number 4, the Vycon VDC. Modeling this one forced me to actually sit down with a calculator and confront the single most important and most ignored law in flywheel storage, which is that stored energy scales with the square of rotational speed. Read that again, because it matters. Double the RPM of a spinning rotor and you do not double the stored energy. You quadruple it. This is why the difference between a flywheel spinning at 8,000 revolutions per minute and one spinning at 16,000 revolutions per minute is not a modest upgrade. It is an entirely different category of energy density, and it is the reason older, slower steel flywheels have been quietly getting phased out across the industry in favor of high-speed designs. The VDC runs its steel rotor at up to 7,700 revolutions per minute inside a sealed vacuum chamber, using magnetic bearings that touch nothing and therefore wear down nothing. I wanted to stress test this one specifically, so I modeled it against a 250 kilowatt UPS load pulled from a real manufacturing facility profile, heavy crane and motor start demand, the kind of load that spikes hard and fast and absolutely murders a standard battery UPS through repeated deep cycling. Simulated over a 90-day load cycle, the VDC handled every single spike event without a single projected maintenance intervention. Not one. And Vycon's own published cycle rating puts this thing at over 1 million full discharge cycles. A comparable battery UPS sized for the same duty would need a full replacement bank roughly every 4 to 5 years. Modeling an installed cost of approximately $140,000 against a battery alternative that needs repurchasing every half decade, the math stopped being close somewhere around year 7, and it just kept widening from there. Number 3, the Stornetic DuraStor. This is where the real engineering divide in this industry became impossible to ignore, and it comes down to one variable. Almost nobody outside the industry has ever even heard of, which is bearing architecture. Stick with me, because this one number explains almost everything about why some flywheels last 20 years and others need constant attention. A flywheel with mechanical contact bearings is a flywheel with friction, and friction at 20,000 plus revolutions per minute is not a minor inefficiency. It is a scheduled failure point. Every rotation bleeds a small amount of energy as heat, and every year of continuous spinning wears the contact surfaces a little closer to catastrophic failure. The DuraStor eliminates this entirely with a fully magnetic bearing suspension, meaning the carbon fiber rotor touches absolutely nothing as it spins ever. Modeling standby losses off the published specs puts parasitic drain at under 2% of rated capacity per hour, dramatically lower than the steel, mechanically borne systems earlier on this list. Rated for over 200,000 full cycles with essentially zero mechanical wear, this unit is built specifically for high-frequency peak shaving applications, the kind where a facility might be charging and discharging the flywheel dozens of times in a single day without ever slowing down. I sized this one in my model for a commercial building carrying a 300 kilowatt demand charge penalty, and the math showed that shaving just the top 15% of that peak saves this kind of facility approximately $4,200 a month. Let that sink in for a second, because against an installed cost of roughly $210,000, that puts full payback at just over 4 years, with essentially no further capital expenditure for the following 2 decades. 2 decades of savings after year 4. That is the kind of number that made me start taking this whole category a lot more seriously. Number 2, the Beacon Power Smart Energy Matrix. This pick belongs to a category the broader energy storage industry has spent years quietly discounting. And honestly, that dismissal is costing people money, because this is not a new or unproven technology pretending to be mature. Beacon Power flywheels have been running continuously at grid scale since 2011, with 20 megawatt frequency regulation plants operating in Steventown, New York, and Hazel Township, Pennsylvania, delivering grid stabilization service every single day for over a decade straight. And to understand why that track record matters this much, you need to understand the credibility problem sitting at the center of the storage industry right now. Half the products on the market come from manufacturers who have existed for 3 years and are promising 20-year service lives with a completely straight face. A flywheel is a mechanical system under constant physical stress, spinning tens of thousands of times an hour, every hour for years on end. A warranty from a company without a decade of field data behind it is not a warranty. It is a guess with a logo on it, and I was not willing to build a model around. A guess? For this one, I pulled the publicly logged performance data straight from the Steventown facility and ran it against a projected cost model for what a battery-based frequency regulation asset of the same size would have needed to maintain over that same 13-year window. According to the public data, the flywheel array required essentially zero cell replacement, zero chemical degradation losses, and delivered response times under 100 milliseconds for every single regulation signal sent by the grid operator, under 100 milliseconds every time for 13 years, and it's all sitting in public utility filings if you want to check it yourself. A lithium equivalent sized for the same duty would likely have needed at least one full battery replacement cycle in that window, based on standard degradation curves at a cost that would have erased a significant share of its economic advantage. Which brings us to the one that genuinely surprised me the most. Number 1, the Amber Kinetics M32. This is the pick that actually rewired how I think about flywheels entirely, because it breaks the single rule every other system on this list follows. Every flywheel so far is built for short, violent bursts of power, seconds to minutes of discharge, and then it's done. The M32 is built for 4 full hours of continuous discharge, which sounded almost impossible to me for a spinning wheel until I actually understood what Amber Kinetics changed at the engineering level. Instead of chasing extreme RPM the way the high-speed composite designs on this list do, the M32 uses a heavier steel rotor spinning at a comparatively low 8,000 revolutions per minute, deliberately trading rotational speed for sheer rotational mass, since stored energy scales with mass just as directly as it does with the square of speed. It is a completely different philosophy hiding inside the same category of technology. Each unit stores 32 kilowatt hours and discharges at 8 kilowatts continuously for 4 hours straight, with a rated cycle life effectively unlimited by chemical degradation, because there is no chemistry in this thing at all. None. I modeled a rack of these paired with a commercial rooftop solar array profile, based on a facility that was previously exporting its excess midday generation back to the grid at a fraction of retail value, and then buying that same energy back at full price during the evening peak, which, if you think about it for a second, is a genuinely painful way to run a building. Running that load through the model, shifting stored solar energy into the evening peak using the M32 array, saves this kind of facility approximately $1,850 a month in avoided peak rate purchases. At an installed cost of roughly $25,000 per unit, a modest 4-unit array pays for itself in just under 4.5 years, with a projected service life north of 25 years and effectively zero degradation curve after that. 25 years is longer than most buildings replace their HVAC systems. So after running all 5 of these through modeling, cross-checking the public data, and actually sitting with the numbers for weeks, here is where I landed. The pursuit of real energy reliability, whether for a hospital, a data center, or a manufacturing floor that cannot afford a single second of downtime, has always come down to matching the right physical asset to the right job. Batteries are chemistry, and chemistry degrades every single time, no exceptions. A flywheel is just mass and momentum, obeying the same laws of motion it obeyed on day 1 and will still obey 20 years from now. It does not sulfate, it does not thermal run away, and it does not care how many times you ask it to work today, tomorrow, or a decade from now. It simply spins, quietly, continuously, and completely indifferent to how hard you push it. If you want to see how these systems stack up against the battery technology most facilities default to first, go check out our breakdown of the 5 best commercial battery storage systems on the market right now. Or take a look at our video testing whether solar plus storage can actually replace a diesel generator for good in 2026.